Open heart, open mind. I welcome you all to the Sattva channel, which is an official online platform of the Sattva project. My name is Samiksha Mishra.
And I'm Samiksha Kamdil, and we both are from Satwa Youth, a program developed by Satwa Project itself.
So before we start with our discussion, let me thank an individual who manages all the technical issues in the background, our broadcast director, Brother Chong. Brother Chong, would like to say hi to our audience, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening or morning, wherever you are, on our broadcast on Facebook Live as well as YouTube Live. So please do like and share so that more can benefit. And those on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe as well. And now back to you, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Vanessa.
Brother Chong. So now let's move to our title of tonight's discussion, which is Impermanence and the Certainty of Change. And this is the part two. Okay, let's introduce to our contributors and the moderator of tonight's discussion. Samiksha.
Okay, so our moderator for today is Sister Stacey Martin. Stacey Martin holds a master's degree in Sustainable International Development and an undergraduate degree in anthropology. She has over 20 years of experience providing program and grant management support to various non-profit organizations. She currently works as the content manager for the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, a non-profit archiving and disseminating the teachings of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
A warm welcome, Sister Ceci.
Thank
Welcome
you
to the
for
discussion.
having me. Good morning or good evening.
Good evening.
So our first contributor is Venerable Tenzin Dasel. Venerable Tenzin Dasel is a teacher and leader who has been practicing Buddhism and meditation for over 2 decades. She is the founder of Main Mindfulness Project and serves as the Buddhist spiritual advisor at Bates College and the spiritual program coordinator at Tashi Gatseling Buddhist Center. She holds many honors and distinctions for her work with women, children, and youth throughout the US, India, and the world. We are
Hello,
pleased to
dear
have you,
brothers.
Venerable Tenzin Dasel.
Hello, dear
Thank you so
brothers
much
and
for joining
sisters.
us.
Hello. Nice to be with you today and looking forward to a fruitful discussion on the possibilities that uncertainty and change bring to us every day. Thank you for inviting and glad to be here.
Thank you. Our second contributor is Kat Leo. Kat is well qualified and holds BSc honors in psychology, MSc organizational psychology, MSc occupational through health, and postgraduate diploma in high intensity psychological therapies. Kat is currently working in IAPT service as a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist. She has been working in mental health as an occupational therapist for over 8 years. Kat was interested in Buddhism since a child and explored more when she moved to the UK for continue her university education. She is also a volunteer with the local Scouts group. A warm welcome, Kat.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm really excited to share the discussion today on impermanence, and I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next contributor is Nivedita Chalill. Nivedita is a founder of ARTH, a mental health initiative that offers counseling and arts based therapy services for people dealing with mental health issues. Her academic and professional training across over 25 years has focused on alleviating suffering through compassionate action. She is a trained occupational therapist from KEM Hospital and a psychiatric social worker with a doctorate from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, where she also served as faculty. She has provided care in diverse mental health settings, ranging from hospitals to rehabilitation centers, and has worked in crisis areas such as suicide prevention and disaster relief post earthquakes and tsunamis. She has been actively involved in relief efforts during the pandemic with JSA Jan Swasthya Abhiyan in resource mobilization, creation of a helpline and training workshops. She facilitates two courses on applied Buddhist psychology in Mumbai and Chennai in partnership with BALM. with an aim of bringing wisdom and compassion to our daily lives. She began studying Buddhism during her training with the WCCL Foundation Pune with Asha Pillai Balsara and continues to pursue her studies in Buddhist philosophy from Tibet House, New Delhi with Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdullah. A warm welcome, Nivedita, to the session.
Thank you
I'm
so
sorry,
much.
Dr. Nivedita to the session.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Very grateful to the Sattva group and team for hosting this. Especially, I feel a continued conversation on impermanence is helpful because we all could use the reminders. And immense gratitude to my teachers for sharing all of their knowledge and with so much of compassion that and repeated iterations so that even some of us can get a few things in. So very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And now over to you, Sister Stacey.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the presenters and the organizers. And thank you all for your time and energy. I'm really excited to be back again for part 2 of the certainty of change and impermanence. So, for myself, we can probably talk about this for months. So I think, our first part of the discussion, we talked more about how suffering, the first part of the discussion, we talked about our understanding of change as it relates to the 3 types of suffering. The suffering of suffering, which is like our physical and emotional pain and discomfort that humans experience throughout their lives, this general discomfort. And then there's the suffering, we talked about the suffering of change, the suffering that arises from our resistance to change. And then the all-pervasive suffering, I think just that, our mere existence as human beings. There's this pervasive suffering that exists. So I thought that maybe since we discussed how reflecting on impermanence can help with managing difficult emotions and experiences before, we can start by maybe exploring the other half. There seems to be the change that happens to us, and then the change that we want to, evoke or create in our own lives. So I thought maybe we can start and discuss a little bit more of that part. And given that there are kind of these various, we have a tendency to have a resistance to change. How can we be more opened to it? Or what about the positive experiences of change that we like to bring about in our lives? Or we've all experienced positive experiences of change. But I was curious if maybe we could start by first discussing what determines or influences how we view or perceive change, So I don't know if somebody wants to volunteer to start.
I'm happy to start first.
Okay.
Probably very basic knowledge that a lot of people are aware of, and then I'll be quite interested to hear the Dharma approach as well. So from my own experience and learning, often the factors that influence how we relate to anything in general, even if it's not related to impermanence, change, or something good, is our experience, is our upbringing, is the culture that we're brought. For example, looking at the people's reaction to change. And I'm jumping straight into the other end of life, for example, passing away and death and things like that. It's so fascinating how different cultures approach that or talk about it. Some avoid it, some don't avoid it as much. And so from my own experience, I feel it's to do with the culture that we're brought up in, the information that's available for us to think independently. Some people might not have the opportunity to access internet, the library, or different people with different perspectives. And so I think those are quite important to acknowledge and recognize that perhaps there are different factors out there that we can't control is influencing us, how we understand change. But at the same time, from acknowledging that, it means that we also have the chance to reshape how we see things. So, for example, if I look into, for example, like my own salary, you know, there's change in there, I'll be super happy. I think it depends on the situation we're in. We might think it's a really positive thing to have some change. In other situations, we might not see, for example, losing a job initially might say, oh my God, you know, that's not really helpful. And it sounds like a negative thing. And often I feel like we might dictate whether a change is good or bad by our initial emotions or the initial outcome of something. But what I think is sometimes it's helpful to look at the long-term consequences or other future prospects that might help us then redefine what change might be and why it might be more positive than we initially experience.
Great. And Dr. Nivedita or Venerable Dasel, what would you like to share?
Dasila, would you like to go first?
I think it's important. Oh, you've muted me. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Oh, okay. It says that you've muted me. Sorry. I think it's important to think about this topic first in the context of not just ordinary everyday experience of change, but the security and uncertainty of change from the Buddhist framework. Because what we're really talking about here with these three sufferings, isn't that all of life is suffering? You know, we talked about the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, and the suffering of all pervasive suffering. But this is exactly these unsatisfactory experiences that we have in life are exactly what motivated Buddha as Siddhartha to look for a solution out of the suffering of uncertainty. So what I'd like to suggest is that without impermanence, nothing could change. You know, in these days, I feel that there's so much tension and anxiety and mental health issues and bad, kind of unhealthy behavioral issues that are driven in the society by the fear of change, by the fear of uncertainty, by the impulse to try to control what's happening from beyond us. And this is exactly what the Buddha says creates the suffering.
Right.
Only until we know the suffering well that we start to feel inspired by that to look for a result in a solution, the liberation that's beyond the suffering. Now, that doesn't mean that change won't still occur. Of course, bodies, physical materialism from our body to our planet by its own nature is going to change. That would be silly to always constantly trying to prevent that change from happening. Of course, we should take care of our body. Of course, we should take care of the physical environment, the ecology. But these days, more people are much more concerned about their foods that they're eating, taking photos of these things, talking about the global warming and crisis change of this, whereas they're not even attending to the fact that it's their own mind first that needs to transform and change to be able to be an effective guide within all these other challenges. If we don't start from within, there's no sense in getting busy in the world without, because the world outside is the false appearing world of samsara. And so these days, many more people are much more involved with which degrees they're holding, which titles they have, which careers they have, how much money they're saving for retirement. We don't even know if we're going to get to retirement. We might expire before we retire. So, the Buddha's message is maybe you better start getting busy within, getting your mind clear, so you can then really handle what's going to come up naturally through being in the material world as part of a compounded phenomena reality. There's something that transcends that permeates it, that is very stable, very clear, that is beyond changing. In Vajrayana, we call that the Vajra mind, the unshakable, unbreakable mind that is like a diamond, so that's your wisdom. And then you take the compassion, knowing the true nature of mind is actually very capable of becoming liberated, changing all the way up to its Buddha nature, recognizing that, getting beyond all the distractions of the external perceived world into the true view, then we can take on the challenges that are arising through the conventional appearance of the world. So I think this is very important before we get into, other kinds of psychology and approaches, because Western psychology takes many different approaches to impermanence, change, childhood trauma. Buddha just says, forget it. Your childhood's done. Use it as an example. You've changed already. Your body's been changing. You're not crawling around on the floor anymore. Your mind's been changing. You've been cultivating lots of skill sets. You've proven to yourself you have the capacity to change. Now keep going all the way up to Buddhahood. And then we use all the challenges that we encounter to become Buddha. So in this sense, change is a great news. It's wonderful. I wanted to share this quote from the Gyalwang Drukpa. He says, as we begin to practice choosing happiness, freeing our minds to be happy, seeing things differently and appreciating every day, we might see our fears and uncertainties from an alternative angle. We begin to see that where there is fear, there is life. Where there is uncertainty, there will be things that surprise and delight us. This knowledge is the bedrock of wisdom. This knowing is the precursor to choose an affirmative life of happiness. And this isn't going to mean we're going to be able to control everything. It means we're going to be able to meet the joys, the goods, the pleasures, and the pains, the unexpected. Yes, there will be sadness and tears, but as we talked about in our first session, knowing about these 8 worldly concerns and being able to navigate them right down the middle with a joy that is never dependent upon what's happening, loss or gain, pleasure or pain, praise or blame, fame or shame of a bad reputation. We still feel clear in our own heart mind to be able to stay in joy and clarity, knowing that there are going to be things that are going to be coming up all the time.
Thank you, Venerable Dasel, for framing that for us.
Yeah, so beautiful between the subtler view as well as coming back to 8 worldly concerns. Mm-hmm. So, Stacey, when you asked your question about saying how we view and perceive change from what Kat shared as well as what Dasalla shared, I feel also it's important to understand what we mean by change. When we say, how do we view change? When we just hear the question, most of us think of large events, right? Promotion, death, some diagnosis, house shift, whatever else. It's always something large. I feel perhaps we also need to move a little beyond that. Of course, those are changes for sure, but it's also a whole lot of smaller changes which are actually happening constantly. But most of the time, we've solidified things, we've solidified self. So we see change only when all the leaves have fallen. That's when we say, oh, now it's fall. But, fall began before all the leaves had fallen. And it started with one leaf beginning to lose a teeny tiny bit of color. It's just that we were too busy, perhaps, and we couldn't notice it. And really saying that, in which case, when change comes as something big, is it really that big, or did we not see it and sense it earlier? So I feel one of the things about how we see change is really as solid, as something big like this bucket of bricks which is coming at us. And what Dasalla mentioned about these 8 worldly concerns, even last time, saying that because we've solidified the good stuff and the bad stuff and the self, by default, we don't approach anything with an open mind, frankly. We'd like to think we're approaching the good stuff with an open mind, but honestly, not really. I mean, even if you've kind of walked towards a stage to receive an award, there is this tension about, oh my God, I must get it. Oh my God, it must be mine. Oh my God, I should not trip and fall on my way there. There's so much of, it's not with an ease. It's not with openness. It's done with this. Even the good stuff, we go at it with a sense of, let me hold it, let me grab it, let this be mine. And therefore, by the implied thing is not only must this be mine, but this mustn't be yours. So, we're doing so much of this with the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. I feel one of the ways perhaps we need to reinterpret or work through he's saying, can I start seeing things not when they become so big and so solid? And maybe can I start becoming a little bit more aware of the subtler changes, perhaps? That way, what happens is it's not only my interpretation of the big stuff, but I work with my interpretation even of the smaller stuff. And perhaps that gives us a certain ease of being, a certain grace with which we can approach both, like the good stuff or the bad stuff, whatever's coming our way. But we can be a little more gracious about it rather than going at it with the habits and patterns that, as Kat mentioned, which comes from our conditioning and our training and our habits of the mind. We don't just go at it with this heaviness.
Yeah, can I just add something to that? Because what the message that I'm receiving from Venerable and Nivedita is that it's so important to look within, the changes within and the mind within, in order to embrace or engage in the actual positivity and benefits of change and impermanence, which kind of brings me to mind. It sounds like it's a lot of people say, I know this. I know, I need to do this. I know I need to do that. But it's the practice. It's kind of what we call, what Tenzin Dasel was doing. She was demonstrating flexibility in her mind, in her, what we say, cognition, the way that she thinks. She's able to see things in different perspectives so that she can see the bigger picture and know what change is like, so that it doesn't control her, or in fact, actually, she can influence her outcome to some degree. But I find that a lot of people, including myself, especially when we're in pain, when we're in survival mode and our life is so busy, I don't know if any of you have tips and ways. I mean, I can share some of mine as well later on, but I was wondering how you might sort of invite somebody to help themselves, to help their brain to think in different perspectives and see change in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Like how you can create some space around the small stuff, or the medium stuff and the big stuff. How do you, I think even just having the ability to just distance yourself a bit from whatever issue is arising, so that you can gain that wider perspective and have that, bit more fluidity in your mind to see from different angles. But you raise a really, really, really important question, Kat. How do we begin to do that? Because when it really hits home, when the big stuff, the little stuff, okay, we managed to get through. But, when the big stuff hits, it's deep and it's hard and it's heavy and it feels solid, So how do we begin to create space around that?
I think, this is why we have these practices that we call in Buddhism our practice, which begins with mindfulness. And so I wouldn't even minimize the little stuff, Sister Stacey. I'd say the little stuff also is a precursor to how we're going to then respond when the big stuff really comes. So it's the little knowings. As soon as there's a little tension, that means our mind has already lost its peace and its equanimity. So as soon as there's even a little frustration, we just come back to breath. And we take a breath in and take a breath out until that sensation calms down. We just stop what we're doing. Or if we can't stop, if we're driving and something comes up, we just notice, oh, my mind, there's a tension. I'm aware of the tension. We do the opposite. We lean into it. We breathe into it instead of resist it. Instead of feeling some kind of a tension and thinking, oh, I'm driving, I've got a long drive, let me stop and get a coffee. We say, forget the coffee. Let me continue driving and just lean into that awareness with breathing, accepting that that tension is there, not trying to placate it, not trying to distance from it or soothe over it. And so the mindfulness is so important, because whether it's a little tension that then grows from frustration into agitation, into anger, as soon as you're in the frustration, that's a one-way path to anger. You've already lost your peace of mind. You've lost your clarity, you've lost your joy, you've lost your compassion, and you've lost your equanimity, your balance. So first we start by noticing and then giving compassion. Just you think you're the only person out of the, now in November we're going to get our 8 billionth person on the planet. You think you're the only being that's experiencing that emotion? Not at all. Have compassion first, that that's a human experience. And then you can truly embrace it and understand it by staying with it. But by being skillful, by using your wisdom, breathing in, becoming aware, and using the breath in and out until you feel that just kind of moves through. It will release. It will not release if you don't give it some attention. And then with that attention, that's the wisdom part, bring in compassion. Just like me, not one other living being, forget even just the 8 billion humans, but every living being, not one other living creature wants to feel this kind of frustration, this kind of fear, this kind of tension, this kind of anxiety. That's true. There's an all-pervasive wish for happiness and not having suffering. So we then bring compassion with a deeper awareness through our own experience, and we can send that out. Oh, just like me, all beings want compassion, need compassion. May I be only a source of compassion to oneself, and may I be only a source of compassion to all of the life forms that I encounter. Then we can even greet the aliens if they're going to come with a compassion. To tell a little joke. Anyway, that's the mindset. It's our mindset. It's our mindset that matters the most. And so it's our own very experience that is the best teacher. And that means showing up very clear to that experience. Why personally I'm not at all, and the Buddha also forbade like heavy alcohol, psychedelic drugs. Even we could say, and I mentioned coffee, sometimes people use that as a go-to. We really have to get mature enough to be able to be present to what's happening and to attend to that with wisdom and with compassion. And that's how we practice. And that we can do anytime. That's not in your formal meditation practice, but we need a little of that every day. Some sessions of sitting on the cushion, coming into the awareness of breathing in, breathing out as our base meditation we can do everywhere, using breath. And then using compassion, seeing what's on our heart, mind, and then moving through the day with more and more awareness, with a commitment to oneself that we will live with that wisdom and compassion. And when things come up, that we will meet them with the wisdom and compassion. So that's making our whole day as our practice. And it's wonderful. Then you actually look forward, when the obstacles arise, we used to say on our path, that's a good sign. That means our practice is getting us someplace.
Thank you, Venerable Dasel. I wanted to just interject on what you said concerning, absolutely, applying the mindfulness and the compassion. What I have personally found working through actually trauma, deep trauma for many years, was enacting more self-compassion first. So it was a little bit difficult necessarily to immediately go and think about others, because the mind, I noticed, goes directly to the pain and heaviness that's felt within from my own side. Maybe I didn't have the spaciousness all the time, but with a daily practice of self-compassion, of becoming my best friend, of saying, oh, friend, you're hurting right now. Oh, and putting my hand in my heart and just going, good buddy, you can do this. We can do this. Like, we can do this together. And just slowly, whatever, like just one thing at a time. If like, say, for example, if I'm driving and maybe something came up and I was triggered. Okay, let's get to the stop sign, friend. We can get to the stop sign. And when we get to the stop sign, would you like to stop? Maybe we can even pull the car over and just relax and have a breather. So it was just like literally becoming my own best friend. How was I able to become my own best friend? By totally embracing everything that was arising in my mind, that I may not have wanted to feel or anything. I want to push away those bad feelings, the heavy feelings. No, it was just like you said, just embracing what was arising and having some sort of, creating a bit more space. But the only way that I found I was able to find that space was by having deep compassion for myself. And then I noticed with this mind training, it enabled me to be more compassionate towards others, because if everything comes from the mind, like Buddha says, we're projecting out and we're seeing. So a compassion arises in my mind a little bit easier, more quicker, or whatever, I don't know, through this self-compassion practice. So I just wanted to interject that, because I know sometimes, it's the small steps that take us to the Mahayana big view of, wishing all beings to be free and happy and be without pain. Yeah, and we can do those 4 measurable practices every day, of course. But I do find that sometimes it's difficult to think about the 8 billion people, but if I start with myself, then slowly, I can have more compassion for my children, for, my neighbor, for my coworker, for, the stranger walking down the street or whatever.
I guess just to clarify, that was my point. I said we start with ourselves and we say, just like me, all the others want happiness and don't want suffering. So that was really the point I started with, was that we lean in, just starting with our own knowledge of our experience and knowing that that experience is also shared by the wish of the 8 billion wanting also happiness and not wanting it. But if we don't know it for ourselves, how can we have a genuine wish for others? Just to clarify.
Yeah.
I wanted to add a few things as well. One is when Dasel spoke about alcohol and other substances, I also feel, frankly, we've got a slightly deadlier device, all of us, with this little thing in our hand. With our lovely phones, I feel distraction is right there, so there is the slightest amount of discomfort or pain, and we've got distraction sitting right there. And I feel there is a critical need to turn that around, and like what Dasala said, bringing mindfulness back into that moment and awareness back into that moment. I also feel that I don't know if the time to do that is when things are really tough. So ideally, I feel it needs to start now. It's like trying to teach someone to swim when they're drowning versus maybe we could start a little bit before. Because typically, if you see how mainstream goes, whether it's education, whether it's how we live our lives, there is a need to consume, sleep, consume, sleep, And I'm not sure if that's really the way to go. So we need to perhaps look at spaces where we can step away, however small. It's not so much about a physical space as much as a mental space to step back and really start saying, what am I and what's going on here? Because if we need to cultivate some amount of really familiarity with our minds, and most of the time, I think some of us are almost kind of averse to that. The idea of saying what really goes on here is so horrible. I can't even bear the thought of looking there. And I feel there is a need to examine those, because while we talk about clinging and grasping on the outside, frankly, there's also a lot of holding on to our own narratives about self, narratives about the world, narratives about how I am in the world, not just the victim narrative or a survivor narrative, but a lot of other narratives of this is always happening to me. And it doesn't always have to be something big. I mean, it could be the shoelace that snaps right before you leave the door in a rush, which is getting you to, pull your hair out in frustration. So I feel small stuff, big stuff is one part of it. But what is critical is we learn to put our distractions aside for some time on a daily basis and use that time to really start saying, what is the habit of my mind? It doesn't have to be religious. It doesn't have to be very deeply scientific from some paper, but really saying, what is my attitude? What is my tendency? What are stories that I tell myself, about my childhood, about how that influences me, and therefore the I is angry or the I is anxious, or therefore even that I deserve compassion or that I don't deserve it. So just being able to explore this with a sense of, let me see what's going on in there. So then I can start examining, does this pattern really, so it has elements of not only how I see myself, but also how I'm interpreting all of these little events which come my way. So when I sit back for my daily 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever time is possible, Can I examine how my lovely habits are interacting with that broken shoelace, the angry boss, the traffic jam, the the shopping queue where somebody jumped in before me, whatever else that's going on in our day? Can I stop to examine it without the distraction? And then can I slowly start learning to stabilize myself and say, what happens if I tweaked something? I remember a client who started saying that whenever there was a call coming in from someone whom she really did not want to speak to, her anxiety would get so spiked. And she's like, I had no other strategy, but all I managed to do before, as I'm watching the phone ring and, the display number shows, she's like, I'm taking a deep breath and smiling. She's saying the smile was completely fake. I couldn't do anything else but hold that fake smile. And she trained herself to hold that fake smile for about 30 to 60 seconds of the call. And it helped shift something for her. So it was with great kindness. She couldn't generate any compassion towards this person. She was feeling, well, not very charitable towards, but even just holding that 30 seconds of saying, I'm going to make it hold a smile, shifted her tone of voice, perhaps, way of being, perhaps. And as a result, I feel somewhere those interactions slowly started shifting. It just allowed a new element to mix in with the older habit and pattern, which led to a very different result. So we can start really small, but we can slowly build towards 8 billion humans and all the other sentient beings.
Yeah, that's great. Learning to abide in that discomfort, the small, yeah.
What Dr. Nivedita is referring to in many ways is very good, talking about that we can use that as a distraction and addiction that really literally changes our brain by the amount of time we're interacting, as does the smile change our mind and also changes the neuro pathways in the brain. So if we want to just check out and create another addiction that is mindless and get absorbed and down the tube of mindlessness, well, hold that in your hand every day. So this retreat that I just came out of with these amazing 10 college students nearby here in Maine, they all had to agree to unplug, sit down, and tune in. And we were just using that awareness. And we're also, there's a Thai monk friend of mine that I'm part of this group called the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, INEB. And we said, we just need to do smile meditation. That's it. That's the main job of a monk and nun, is smile meditation, because we're here to bring that genuine joy. And especially when someone's really nasty, like they can't control their comments to you. You smile even more deeply inwardly, and you think, okay, may that contact with me be a reason for them one day to attain their highest awakening. But that's a monk and nun approach. I'm just sharing with you. So here in the United States, many people have never seen anyone in the robes before. They don't know what they're seeing. Last year at this time around Halloween, someone literally stopped the car and said, "Excuse me, but I love your costume." And I just said, "Thank you." I said, "Thank you." I didn't try to say I'm a nun, I'm a monk. I love it. I wear it every day. I said, "Thank you." And then 2 weeks ago, a teenager yelled at me after I had walked by this little group, "Hey, get a wig." And it was not meant as a compliment. And I just thought, thank you. I didn't turn around and engage him, but I thought, may your mind, by that contact with me, one day become clarified and all the way up. And then I thought of what Jetsuma says sometimes, is when someone's really not in control, thinking, would I want a mind like that? No, I'm so glad I have Buddha Dharma, and I have this awareness to practice genuine compassion, genuine loving kindness, altruistic wish. May all beings be free. The wish for that doesn't mean we have to engage every time to try to make that come about, but we do have to engage every time with our own mind. That's the one thing we can transform in every interaction. So I like that Dr. Nivedita brought this up, that when this person even just did the fake smile, you can't feel angry if you're trying to, I don't really know if I have this fake smile, I hope not, but you can't really feel angry when you're smiling. It's like you can't hold both at the same time. So even just faking it till you make it, do that. That's a good routine. And unplugging, I took the phones literally from 3 of the college students who said, yeah, it will be better if you just take the phone, Tenzin, because I don't know if I'm going to handle it. But the other 7 put it on airplane mode. They didn't use them. And when we held a whole day of silence from sunrise to dinner and went to a beach for sunrise meditation together, 7 out of the 10, it was optional, so 3 needed to sleep in. I was fine. They know what they need to do. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says sometimes sleep is the best meditation. But at the end of our time together, they said it was fantastic. We didn't miss the phone at all. We benefited so much. We haven't felt this good in maybe some of them forever, a long time, like genuinely with themselves. And we definitely want to do this again on our winter vacation break. I mean, so it was just an optional activity that they could come to. So we can do this, and we have to start by not being on our distractions, and we have to start being on our compassions, 24/7, our compassions, even the fake it till you make it, before you take the call, get into smile mode, just being there for others. So the more we kind of get out of our own fear of uncertainty, our own grasping for control of security and certainty, the more it's other oriented, whether it's one other, 2 others, 3 others, or eventually the 8 billion, the whole planet others, then we can become a really effective agent of bringing stability in the midst of uncertainty. And this is what we need these days, is we need very good agents for stable, joyful, happy lives. Then difficulties will come. We'll meet it with the wisdom. We'll meet it in a much better chance of helping the situation to become improved for everybody's sake. But joy has to be there, and laughter and happiness have to be there too, because these things are what make us human. These bring the qualities of the life. If we only get caught in the fear of uncertainty and the grasping for control, our life will be miserable. I mean, you can look at the war. This is how war starts. It starts from a very small iteration in one person's mind of an idea of control, of mind, of desire, of fear, of ownership, and then it spirals out of control. And once that starts, it's very difficult to stop. As we all know from our own experience, even getting angry, and then you don't feel good, the others don't feel good, your face is no one wants to see that ugly face, Then afterwards you're ruminating, why did I do this? Why didn't I be more skillful? Then have compassion, and become familiar with when those emotions that push you out of your compassion start to arise. Because this is also part of this change, is changing of emotions, changing of, we say inside and outside, but really the whole experience we're having is our projection. It's 90% or more of our own mind's projection and training that's bringing us into habits. So let's create good habits.
Right. And what drives, that creation of good habits? You need to have that motivation and that desire to want to look within. You want to really want to change, to really want to see that there are, it's not beneficial for me to react every time somebody irritates me, and so there has to be this motivation or desire. And then what drives the motivation and desire to want to change?
Well, that's the wish for happiness. That it's a natural, healthy state of mind that we always want happiness. That's a good thing to want. We're allowed to have that. It's not, Buddhism doesn't say no desires whatsoever. Buddhism says, of course, rejoice you have a human life. That's amazing and precious. Okay, 8 billion human beings, but quadrillions of insects alone. We're not an insect. We have a precious, precious life, even more precious with, not just human life, but precious human life, because we've connected to Dharma. We have a path. We have a teacher who showed the teachings. We know that happiness is a beneficial state of mind. You only see blissful, peaceful images of the Buddha. You don't see the Buddha warring and doing things. We know that's the happy example or icon of a good state of mind. So that can alone be our desire, just the wish for happiness and not to have suffering. That alone is enough.
I think talking about desires and motivation, I think it's important to recognize that sometimes we might not have that mood or feeling or motivation to do something. And I think we have I know myself, and some people might have a tendency to think, oh, I'll do it once I'm in the mood, or I'll do it once I have that motivation. And what I see from my own subjective observation of the, good practitioners like you three, is that often you're doing things not because you might necessarily in that moment feel that you want to, depending on the circumstance you're in, but it's like, I feel like you have a goal, you have a meaningful purpose that drives you, rather than in the moment. I'm sure as a human being, you're going to have up and down moods, but it doesn't sound like you let that dictate your next step. You're letting more of your goals and sort of, you might say, your wisdom, your long-term purposes to dictate your actions and how you manage change. And that's why I start to notice, actually, I use less of the word motivated, because then people then say to me, well, I don't feel motivated. And then I get into a necessary debate. And so I think different people might, misunderstand when I use, when you have the motivation to do something. But yeah, I think it's important when all of you mentioned that self-compassion, having that desire to help, to care about yourself and other people. It's something that I feel takes skill, because we might know it's important to be kind to ourselves, but because we've not had that experience of how to be kind to ourselves, we have these automatic thoughts, like more judgmental thoughts, maybe, for example, like, oh, I shouldn't feel like this, or I shouldn't do that, or I'm being selfish to pay a little bit of attention to myself. And it's about how we change that dialogue, as Stacey or Nivedita saying, that narrative, which I feel Buddhism is so helpful, because it's encouraging us that there are different narratives we can have, and it doesn't mean that you're selfish. So I can see there's a few nods, and I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants to add.
I actually do. I wanted to say that, okay, so there's two parts to this. I think motivation. One is over the years, I mean, you can't see it, but there's a lot of white hair there. But one of the things I have great conviction on is really how fickle my moods are. So if I'm waiting for the right mood to do stuff, I can be pretty sure it's not showing up anytime soon. So I have great conviction in that. The other thing I have great conviction in is also how little I know, and I mean this because every single time I have said, I must have this because, my happiness is in it. And I've not got it, for instance. Most of the time, it's actually been quite a good thing that I didn't get it. So I feel even when I say I must have this, now my life is ruined, I'm not going to get ABC or whatever else that I had wanted. And now when I look back, most of these things, actually, it's not such a bad thing at all. So even this conviction in knowing how little I know, and I really can't see beyond my moods. So when I'm saying I really want this, what I mean is I think my mood will flip over to a good side if I get this. But does that mean this thing is a good thing for me? I don't know. So, I think cultivating that conviction and some humility in both your moods as well as your wisdom, which is clearly, lacking in multiple times through the day, that becomes something which I feel becomes ground for saying I must do better. Because if this is my current state and I can see it, and I can see it with humor, and I can see it with, oh, wow, really did not see that coming. You can see it with lightness, but you need to see that. Only then can you start saying, okay, so therefore I need to do better. Otherwise, where's my need to do better going to come from? The second part is also, I feel, we chase happiness and pleasure in a manner which is, I don't know, quite difficult, because it means we're constantly, our eyes on the next thing, because I know whether it's an ice cream or a drink or a outing or a whatever, that pleasure's gone, and it's gone before it even starts, because by the time it's starting, I know it subconsciously it's getting over, and I've got my eyes set on the next thing. So where is really this notion of joy that I seem to be chasing? Instead, can I stop and examine moments where I perhaps had a deeper sense of happiness and joy, which perhaps had some, connecting this with what we spoke about earlier, a sense of openness, a sense of grace, a certain sense of being, knowing that you're okay enough to be able to take whatever's coming in, and yet in that moment being able to hold that moment and engage with that moment with some ease and some flexibility and some fluidity, keeping in mind that you share your space with friends or family members or people you like, or your pets or your plants or the bugs who live on your plants. And you can, in that moment, really just say, can I be a little free with what is coming my way, the good, the bad, and everything else? And of course, the last part saying that I need to really recognize that when I've been with moods of either immense happiness, which has come from some pleasure, or intense anger, or intense anxiety, all my skillful thinking has been out the window. I have been extremely unskillful, extremely unstrategic, and I think made terrible decisions both with any kind of mood, which is, kind of got you. You've not got the mood's got you, So I don't know. So I feel being able to see that with honesty, with compassion, with lightness kind of allows you to say, what kind of daily practice can I do that's going to help me at least save me from myself? I think most of the time I don't need to be saved from a lot of things outside as much as just, and then you see that when you engage with a daily practice, however small, big it may be, whatever size home, family, life space you have, whether it's a prayer, whether it's sitting down, whether it's breath, whether it's accessing nature, which also I feel we don't have enough of. And I can't agree more with what Dasala was saying about sometimes sleeping is a good thing. I see people being sleep deprived constantly and, not being able to engage with nature constantly, all of which aggravates all of these little mood cycles we're in. So having enough conviction in how we are today, knowing that's perhaps not the wisest way of being, and then being a little skillful about just ourselves to say, can I make small tweaks to cultivate a daily practice, for instance, which could be super helpful.
Absolutely. There's somebody that I follow on social media. I think her name is Trisha Hershey, but I would have to check. But she is talking about kind of like liberation through rest, really, finding those moments throughout your day where you can really allow yourself that space from the distractions. And she was really kind of advocating for more sleep, more rest, more, whatever your conditions are, creating the causes for you to sit eyes closed, even if you can't take a nap. But if you can take a nap, go for it. But if you can't, sit with your eyes closed, just relaxing, very like kind of somatic, calmness, bringing your mind into your body, feeling your body. I feel like sometimes, or at least this has been my experience of studying Buddhism, a lot of it could be, and maybe my personality and tendencies as well, to be very heady about it, very in my head. It's very, it could be kind of scholastic, very, lots of mind training, lots of thinking. There's almost like too much thinking, and in one of the many ways that has helped me to get out of that thinking mind and that constant reactivity or that frenetic energy is to just, I keep a daily yoga practice. I have to, because it just brings me into my body. So there is this, idea of embodiment that is really important, that has been quite vital in my own well-being, daily well-being. So just tapping into what's happening in the body right now, like right now, feeling what's in the body. I have a lot of, it's all in my mind right now, but it's really, beginning to feel, the tension maybe in the stomach, the tension like in the hands, whatever, and just going and having maybe some simple techniques or, whatever it is that could kind of 1, 2, 3, take 10, 15 minutes out of your day to tap into how your body's feeling, get out of your thinking mind and get into your body. And it enables you to relax a bit more, even just slightly, and create a bit more space, to be able to
sort of be where you are.
Right.
Yeah. Because actually what you're saying there, Stacey, reminds me of the technique that cognitive behavioral therapists use, where, and you just describe it really well, but they just do it more on pen and paper. And they have the 5 areas, what they call, you write down what your situation is, and you have the labels, because often when you're in such a heightened state of mood or emotion, your thinking brain switches off, according to science. So they say, your emotional brain, your survival brain switched on, your thinking brain is switched off. And that's why when you have something to prompt you, you're more able to calm your emotion brain and use that thinking brain to help yourself bring that attention back, because the thinking brain is in charge of your attention, your concentration, where you focus, your decision making. And so if you have a pen and paper, you draw out 5 areas, 5 circles, you write down your situation, the thoughts or images that come to mind, and then how you feel, not just the emotion where it's like scared or nervous, but as you said, Stacey, how it physically feels from head to toe. And I think doing that naturally brings your attention to the present, because you need to pay attention to your body right now to, as Venerable say, to lean in, to actually face it, right? And so actually just writing things down is perhaps one step to not avoiding. And then you write down what actions you're taking, whether you're ruminating, doing different things, or even avoiding, canceling appointments, and then how that all links in. And that itself reminds me of some of the Buddhist practice when they say, be mindful, be present. Actually, by paying attention to your 5 senses, to how you're thinking and feeling in that moment, is actually another practice to me of mindfulness as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And part of the difference between, these are wonderful conversations and sharings that everyone's doing, and very practical techniques and tips. But one huge difference that I want to bring in from the, daily Buddhist, let's say, professional practice as a Sangha member is we're never really attending that much to oneself around our physical comfort, around having a home, not having a home, having a room, not having a room, having food, not having food. We're always really putting our mind in a pure motivation for the happiness of all mother sentient beings. That doesn't mean we have to suffer, and it doesn't mean we have to sleep on the streets or have no food. It just means we really don't put a lot of thought and attention on our own experience, because the more we think of others, the happier we are. And the more we generate an intention with a pure motivation and a pure dedication for the happiness of all beings to be produced from how we use our body, speech, and mind, we're very careful about how we're using our body, our speech, and our mind. But we're careful in the sense of holding that as the framework for the benefit, as like giving a precious gift to someone else that they really are going to get the most benefit. So the motivation is always focused on not having to literally like give something to others, but with a pure motivation of their benefit in mind, that we're cultivating these qualities to become a pure vessel holding the Dharma that only has happiness, peace of mind, non-harming, wisdom, compassion, equanimity. So equanimity means no bias, for the happiness and benefit of all beings. And to be able to practice, yes, sometimes also as humans, we get very tired. And even Jetsuma, Tenzin Pamola, has said, yes, sometimes at night I'm very tired, but then I remind myself, oh, you're not doing this for you. You're doing this for the benefit of all mother beings, and they're depending on you. They're leading to your practice to be able to be a good, stable guide. So you will do your practice for their happiness. And myself, I will nod through my evening prayer sometimes and say, now you have to start earlier tomorrow, on this evening session. But you have to fight through to as much as you can, even a shortened version with a pure motivation, and then take with compassion and humility that we can't always push our way through. That's not even wise to try to do. Use that experience to have humility, to understand what it is to be human. Be genuinely human, be transparently human. But this is not about a delayed gratification or some kind of immediate reward that Someone said to me, like, oh, I would, a professor bakes apple pies and says to the students, oh, you should come to class tomorrow because there's going to be pie. And it's like, no, they should come to the class tomorrow because their parents are paying $80,000 a year for them to be there. And they're there to learn. That's why they should come to the class. It's their motivation. So I'm almost going to say and debate a little bit with you, the more we use other kinds of external rewards, the less happy we're going to become, because we're going to build up habits that continually mean we have to do something externally to find temporary happiness, which we know cannot lead to lasting happiness, which is why we don't use that kind of short-term reward system as a monk or a nun. Sometimes people say, oh, why is it so severe? The appearance is so severe, your clothing so plain, the hair, no hair, so severe. I say it's not severe at all. It's very simple. It's not severe. It's simple. Because if I'm not doing my quaffing of my hair with all my products, I'm not thinking about my great wardrobe I'm going to put on, which, I have that life, so I can speak about it very genuinely. I have much more time to be doing practices, to be organizing conferences, to be taking other people's children's on retreat, to be meeting with other professionals who need someone to be able to show up right away to make them the focus, and not being even rewarded by payment. It's like the effort is its own reward. And that's what we've really lost sight of.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, Nivedita, you were saying something?
No, I just wanted to add on to what Venerable Dasel said. Frankly, this whole notion of when we're thinking of self versus when we're not thinking of self, for those of us who may be listening and saying, yeah, this sounds very nice, but I've got so much stuff going on in my life and it's difficult. I just want to add another thing. There was this research paper, I can't remember which one. I think it was Richard Davidson in Wisconsin. I could be wrong. They conducted a whole bunch of neurological exams, MRIs, EEGs on meditators and non-meditators. And the goal was to give them some amount of pain, subject them to pain and discomfort, and then examine what's happening in the mind. And while, of course, when there was pain, and I think it was a small electric shock, for some reason that seems to be a favorite, but anyway, so there's this a little bit of pain and discomfort that everybody is put through. And while the pain reactions were similar, what was also found was for the people who were meditating, they were able to come back to baseline and normal and a relaxed open state much faster, and also, as opposed to the others who continued to stay in the I'm hurt, I am pain tight space. In some ways also, we talk about when we're holding on to this view of self very, very tightly, and I want all the good stuff for me, by default, that becomes a slightly tiring position. And not only it becomes a tiring position, you're defending this position all the time. And we need to also start slowly recognizing that perhaps that becomes the source of pain as well. That becomes the source of discomfort as well, that we've solidified self so intensely. That we're now looking for things for self. And then when we're tired of our habits and patterns, again, when we retreat back for rest, it's also like, let me take care of me some more. And whether we're inadvertently kind of strengthening those beliefs. So really being able to look at things from a broader perspective can sometimes be very, very helpful, because how does one really come back into a space of recognizing how much we have, recognizing how much good we can do, instead of focusing on, oh, I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, or oh, if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, then my life would be happy, because we clearly have had 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's not always worked out like that. So being able to build that conviction in to broaden our perspective and really start thinking of benefit of others, and being able to, instead of being prisoners of our own habits and patterns, being able to see things more, perhaps with some wisdom and clarity. And we have so many teachers to learn from. So
yeah, I was thinking, no, I think it's great that you mentioned that experiment, because it goes to show evidence, have illustrated that meditation, the mindfulness technique, helps you let go of those unhelpful beliefs or patterns. And as Tenzin Dasel was talking about, focusing on long-term rather than short-term rewards, and a broader sense of compassion and interest for, for all beings. Actually, I think for me, I think it's a skill to be able to recognize that it's a short-term reward. Because often people think, oh, they say, you try to benefit other people, or you try to help people. And I think this is where there's a fine line between pleasing people or thinking you know best to give other people help, versus actually being so aware and understanding that you know what is helpful for the other person. And I think this is the part where I think, listening to Buddhist practice and talks has helped me recognize, oh, actually, there's a difference between pleasing somebody and actually really helping somebody. And and it goes back to what the Venerable was saying right at the beginning, to help somebody actually comes back to yourself to recognize what your own thoughts are, your feelings, that space, that awareness, in order to extend that awareness and attention to other people as well.
Yes, thank you, Kat. And also just again, that narrative that you mentioned and Dr. Nivedita mentioned, that if we always start with a narrative of I'm so busy, I don't have enough time, I don't have this, I want to have that. If we always start with that narrative, we're never really going to be able to get beyond that. And for the meditators and for myself, that's one of my key practices is the changing of even accepting pain, is that it's not I'm in pain, it's, oh, there's a sensation, painful, pleasurable. And it's just a different way of noting and experiencing. And that does take practice. It does. This is our method of training, as Stacey mentioned, Sister Stacey, about the mind training. We call it our practice. But we have 24/7 every day of our life to continue to train. And we do take the long view. We think, in Buddhism, we have this precious human life and these causes and conditions to meet with the Dharma, to meet with the amazing masters that are here on the planet right now, because in our past life, we were living very genuinely, purely good, kind of like a Western idea of compassion, being a good human being, let's say, because I wasn't born into a Buddhist family. I didn't have any Buddhist exposure when I was young. But when I met Buddhism, I was so relieved. It was like, wonderful. It is a thing. It was like such a joy to know that all the intuitions, all the impulses that were leading me through good decisions and difficult social times, growing up in the US in the 60s, 70s, 80s, still were pointing me in the direction where eventually I connected with the masters that I really knew from a young age. This was what I was really looking for, to become the most healthy, productive, and contributing being that I could be, to make the most of this lifetime. And so that is a practice. And it doesn't mean you have to be Buddhist whatsoever. But the point is, as you mentioned, Kat, Buddhism has effective techniques that are tried and true over 2,600 years. If they didn't have value, they wouldn't still be around. And if they didn't have value to the point of, as a philosophy, as a science, let alone as a religion, there's conversation now between scientists, between philosophers from the West with the East, that are very much in harmony and deepening understanding, deepening the wisdom of the humanity, which is the main point that we're in right now, is the oneness of the humanity. This is what I keep coming back to, is we know we're, in a place where change is inevitable. Sometimes we can recognize it. Sometimes it comes up all of a sudden. We know that's going to be part of the experience. And we also know there are really skillful ways to create a capacity to find that presence, that awareness and security that is really actually happy and open and joyful, free within that knowledge, within that awareness, that then feeds into holding the oneness of the humanity, that we can really benefit. We can really be a source of happiness, be a source of joy, of wisdom. Someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's gone through so much change in his life, but he's like, I miss Lhasa, I miss Tibet. I mean, it was my home for a long time, but I'm just at home wherever I am in the world, because he knows about the unexpected radical changes, the deep sufferings that can come up. And yet he's at home within the world because he's at home within his practice, which is only motivated for the benefit of all mother sentient beings. How beautiful is that?
Right. It kind of brings us back to understanding, the root causes of how we perceive and view change. If you have the value system to want to, utilize this precious human birth, rebirth, and this precious life to attain wisdom and compassion, and this thing called enlightenment. Why do we do that? Well, we do it to be of service, not only to ourselves because we don't want to suffer, but we want to be of service to others so we can help support them on their journeys to awakening, to have greater insight in with wisdom and compassion. So it really is about what we value, isn't it? It's like, do we value that? Do we value, and this goes back to what Dr. Nivedita said, having gratitude, cultivating that gratitude. So we're not always looking for the things that we don't have and desiring to fill up our minds and bodies and spaces with things or desires and this and that. But to begin to cultivate that attitude of, appreciation of, wow, you mentioned, the last time we talked, Venerable Dasel, waking up in the morning and just going, I'm still alive. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Have another day or another morning to kind of go
attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude, right? And that, like you said, Kat, is a skill. These are skills. We're doing Lojong, we're doing mind training. These are skills. We are studying Dharma in our own different ways with however, whatever time or capacity or conditions we have, but we do it, I think, I believe to lessen our suffering, understand our minds better, even begin to understand the people around us a little bit better so we can create space.
I'm still going to go back to happiness on that one, Stacey. We're not trying to lessen our suffering. We're not trying to understand our minds better. Sometimes we just have to bring it to the heart and just have happiness and joy. I mean, you brought that up before, and I wanted to pick up on that because you said we have to get it from the head to the heart. It can't be intellectualized. It's not really lessening suffering. It's like our real nature really is joy. It really is unbiased, unabashed freedom. And this is the point, that if you don't believe that, and you don't have to be a Buddhist to believe that, but that really is our true nature. And we knew that if we were all children on a playground together when we were young, we would all be out there swinging on the swings together with joy. We wouldn't be having heady conversations about therapies and things like this. We'd just be in the moment with awareness, having joy. Because that's what our minds come in with. It's when we start with education and over-intellectualizing, over-labeling, overthinking, that we're losing this sense of the true nature of the joy. That really comes from the heart. Sorry, I just wanted to really bring that point. Because
I love that.
Buddhism is not therapy. Buddhism really is not therapy. There is Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist psychology that is helpful. There is mind training. But Buddhism is joy, and Buddhism is a path to joy. And Buddha only started with suffering to say, like, why is there suffering? Because this isn't the natural state. And then was showing us the way to freedom, complete freedom, unabashed joy and freedom. Like His Holiness is giggling freedom, goofy freedom, not self-conscious freedom, absolute confident freedom. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhiswaha, go beyond, go entirely beyond. Anything you can think of, it's an inconceivable freedom.
And speaking of freedom, I was wondering, Venerable Tenzin Dasel, is how might you advise, especially I think this is an ongoing issue, I know in the world of samsara, there's different forms of suffering, but more the political sort of environment, the situations of different countries, people who are, the asylum seekers, all of these kind of a little bit more extreme people that we might come across and we want to be able to work with. How might we instill that joy, help somebody find that joy when their circumstances are so challenging or they're feeling under threat and they want to stand up for those who are, for what they perceive as injustice? And I know the Dalai Lama have been a really wonderful example for this. But yeah, how would we go about in terms of, because I know you mentioned at the beginning, the possibilities and the joy and opportunities that impermanence brings. How do we sort of start to have that conversation with somebody who's undergoing practical sort of challenges? I don't know if any of you might have any experience around that.
There are a few ways. So it depends on the maturity of the mindset of the person who's in the suffering of a situation. But the first way is we first would think about the happiness of the one creating the suffering, the one that we might label the enemy, the one that's perpetrating the situation that's creating the suffering, because that's the mind that's in the most ignorance. So that's a higher practice. If we can't do that, we look at our own experience of suffering and bring it again back to, just like me, I would never want this to happen to my own family. I would really never want, no one in anyone's family would want this to happen. So when I was 21, someone in my family, I was very close to, I was raised very next door to my grandmother in an Italian family. And her youngest son took her life. He had a psychotic episode and killed his mother. And in high school, I had read the term matricide and patricide in one of my Latin classes. And I thought, that can't even be a concept. No one would do that. My mind really couldn't even agree with it when I read it in Latin. I thought it must be just some weird old thing that happened back in Italy, Rome, in the Latin days that this thing happened. And then within 5 years of learning that concept, this very thing arose in my own family. And it was incredibly heartbreaking, crushing to lose, first of all, my grandmother who helped raise me, but at the hands of my uncle, who was only 7 years older than me. And so this was like an incredibly, at the age of 21, incredibly explosive, implosive moment where I had to decide, what am I going to do with this? I'm either going to rise up and understand that this is a huge dark night of the soul that has a lot of potential to heal through by accepting this pain, and exactly what I just said, having compassion, having loving kindness, not over talking about the feelings to many, but finding a few people who were supportive. The first year almost staying quietly with my own knowing of the pain, because I couldn't even express it well. But then recognizing, well, what did she teach you? Because she was my first spiritual teacher. She would recite a prayer that was a little bit like the Bodhisattva prayer that we say in Buddhism, which is, for the benefit of all beings, even at the time of my death, may the cause of my death be the source of great happiness and great awakening for others. And I remembered this prayer that she said in her Christian practice called the death of the elect. May my death have great meaning, deepening meaning in a universal way for the loving awareness awakening for others. So that kind of came to me a year later, and I thought, well, she definitely would expect more of you than just to be sad about this. She would definitely hope for you to be able to use this moment and to start to really set yourself on a path that you will become someone who can actually embody that same essence that she was teaching you from a young age. And so compassion came to me, which was like, yeah, no one would ever want this. I mean, I didn't even believe it was like a real thing when I read the concept. And yet it gave me the greatest opportunity at the age of 21 to say, look, life is impermanent. You do not know how long you'll have to live a life. You do know that you will lose this lifetime. You don't know when and you don't know how. You better get on it, girl. You better giddy up right now, because this is it. This is the game. So that's where my mind went. It was like, hey, today may be the last day, but it could also be the most amazing day. It might be the day that I'm attaining the awakening of enlightenment, that I can truly be of benefit to countless mother beings. Want that one. And this was long before, as I said before, I met Buddhism, but it was a deeper wisdom that was already very, accessible to me intuitively. But it was making a very strong choice. And that meant even if I slipped and wasn't, constantly on the motivation, I was obviously not a monastic then. That's what helps our motivation, kind of like rocket fuel, taking higher vows. but still it directed all my life choices very carefully to how I progressed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very inspiring, because it must have been so incredibly hard for what I can hear is like the word transformer comes to mind when you're describing your experience, because it sounds like you were so skillful in transforming and giving a more purposeful meaning to that experience. You're going to have experience. You might as well turn that experience into like a resource for something better.
That's
so
right, Kat. And interesting, even in a Buddhist way, like didn't even know Buddhism then. I kind of used in my own moment a dedication and pledge to my grandmother. When I read at her a eulogy at her funeral, I read a quote that said, "There's a land of the living and the land of the dead, and the bridge is love, the only survival, the only meaning." And then it said, I'm very much sitting in the chair you would have been sitting in when you came to visit us, but I'm writing you this letter, and I'm going to close it with a pledge that the love that you gave us and taught us will have been enough. And that's basing that altruistic promise, loving kindness, and the first immeasurable wish is for happiness for all mother sentient beings, by taking it out of like what happened to me and my family and making it a bigger story of honoring a vow that I was making to her as a spiritual teacher, and then bringing it forward, never giving up, never going to quit. But eventually, of course, I was so happy to meet my Buddhist master 20 years ago, because I was like, you've got to do this in collective. It's not a one woman, one person, one non-binary being job. It's like it's the oneness of the humanity, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
Because we are all in the same boat that way. We all have a very limited time experience in this one lifetime. The planet itself has a limited lifetime experience. So we know we can use impermanence as a motivation, as an inspiration. I call it now my daily Dharma dynamite, like I'm not getting younger, more white hairs. If I have my hairs coming, more and more are coming. So I know this is it, and so in that way, we can take it as a very wonderful kind of wake up call, just day-to-day wake up call, not even talking enlightenment with the capital E, but thinking about being that presence, that appearance in the world that's really going to help this vision continue to manifest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Venerable Dasel.
Could I add something?
We have about 8-9 minutes left.
I'll take 2.
You'll take 2? Okay, because I wanted to just ask you one more brief question after that it would be nice to conclude on. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Nivedita.
No, I just wanted to add on to what Venerable Dasel said. Today, mental health, we talk about trauma. This trauma is a big word, but we also talk about growth post-trauma, So really, I think it's nice, like Dasila mentioned earlier, that this conversation between mental health professionals and Buddhists, because there is a lot of truth there. One is, of course, the shock and safety that needs to be gone, that people go through with individual disasters or the large ones. But I feel, what is it that we're holding on when the disaster comes and it goes, and in that immediate phase after? What is it that we choose to keep with us? What do we choose to focus on? I think those become critical elements. With natural disasters that we saw, for example, in Nepal and other places that I worked in, it was different because it was natural. But when there were terror attacks and we were doing work for relief after you have somebody walking in with a gun and there is a man-made disaster, so to speak, the anger that comes up is a lot more. But also I felt what elements that helped with healing was really what areas we really looked at. Like Dasila spoke about love, but being able to see acts of heroism where people helped each other. Or even in Nepal, while we were there for relief work, you could see people as they moved between homes or between rubble, you could see them, they holding their elbow and then asking for way. They would do this so graciously. It's something which comes so naturally as part of culture. And I felt like even in that moment, their houses have gone, they've lost people they've loved, but this element of conveying respect and grace, even in something as minute as passing through, was incredibly moving. And I feel that's something that all of us have. We have the power to create cultures, customs, rituals, routines, which perhaps will hold us when things are not going well. And those things will come. So, whether we can look at also in our own lives to think a little bigger and beyond self, to be able to create something not just for us, but perhaps smaller circles in our little corners of the world, maybe. But at least that would be a good space to begin. So thank you for sharing that.
And I think just the culture of the oneness of humanity, because it is just the same culture around the planet, whether it was in Nepal in the rubble, whether it was 9/11 in the rubble, humanity shows up and helps. And that's the healthy sign of the oneness of humanity.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. So in conclusion, I was thinking it would be interesting to just go around and share a word that best captures the essence of impermanence or the certainty of change for you. Who would like to start? Kat, would you like to start?
Yeah, so what came to mind was the word hope. Because it means no matter how bad things get, that can change. And true, no matter how good things get, that could change too. But then because it's like there's always hope, there's always a chance for something positive, and it's more of a choice which one you want to, as you said, focus on and attend to. So hope came to mind. I suppose I was in quite a good mood that day. It might have come with a different phrase if something else happened possibly, but I think hope is something that I try to relate to impermanence or change.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. And Venerable Dasel?
Aware.
Okay, that's good. Aware. Dr. Nivedita?
I think the word I'd go with is. Change just is. Impermanence just is. I don't know if I feel we layer it and we say I must do a whole lot of things to cope with it and so on. But frankly, it just is. And perhaps if we learned to just, I don't know, be with it, it might be a whole lot better. So yeah, is.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like all of those. The word that came to my mind was potential. And if you if I just sort of meditate on the essence of the word potential, similar to, yours, it just has this vast spaciousness to it, and that's what I love, because I think that's really what we're talking about, right? Because impermanence pervades all, and it is, and it does bring hope and potential, and we must be aware of it, aware to practice. Thank you so much to all of you. This has been really wonderful. It's been so nice to meet you, connect with you. You're all so intelligent and wise and compassionate women that I love it. I love this conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. And I hope we can create the causes to talk about different topics in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, despite being tired, I was really hoping that this discussion continues. It was really very interesting. So it was very practical, and like all the practical advices you gave, I'm really very thankful to all of you. Thank you so much. So I think before we finish, we have some announcement.
So we have an upcoming event on 6th of November. The title is Music to Transform a Turbulent World. I hope I read. Okay. What special role does music have in the Buddhist tradition to benefit others? For this session, the moderator will be Raymond Lam, and the contributors will be Amy Oi and Rukmo Gal. So now I would like to invite each one of you to recite a small dedication prayer. What would you know? So first, Venerable Tenzin Dasel.
Bodhi mind, precious and sublime, may it arise where it has not arisen, the mind that cherishes others and self equally and sees their happiness, wishes for happiness, joy, equanimity, and compassion as being all pervasive throughout all life. May this mind arise and never decline, and where it has not arisen, may it immediately touch the heart mind to arise and flourish forevermore. We dedicate these merits of our time together for this Bodhi mind to take root and seed in all the causes and conditions of all mother sentient beings. And may all be awakened. May samsara be completely emptied and non-abiding nirvana take hold.
Thank you, Venerable. Sister Cat. You're muted, sister.
Thank you so much for that. Apologies. Just wanted to share Ashantideva's dedication prayer. May all beings everywhere plagued by sufferings of body and mind obtain a notion of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remains, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you. Dr. Nivedita, please.
I'll also borrow from Shantideva's words from the dedication chapter. By the merits accumulated, may every single being abandon all forms of wrongdoing and perpetually engage in virtue. May they never be parted from the mind of Bodhicitta. May they always engage in the Bodhisattva's conduct. May the teachings, which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy, be materially supported and honored and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manju Ghosha, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop.
Thank you, Dr. Nivedita. Sister Stacey.
May the positive energy of our time spent together bring greater insight and understanding for ourselves and everyone listening now and in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. And now let me recite the 4 great vows. Sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. Illusions are endless. We vow to cut through them all. The teachings are infinite. We vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable. We vow to attain it. May all beings be well, happy, and safe. Thank you. Thank you, each one of you. Thank you very much for your precious time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Sattva Project, and to Brother Sherab and Brother Chong and everybody, the Samikshas. And have a beautiful time, beautiful life, and hope to see you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all your time and energies. Much gratitude to the team. Thank you, Dasalla. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Stacey and Samik. And like you, Dasalla said, Samikshas.